Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zervis, Technical Evangelist here at CTC, and today we're going to cover a new topic that I've been wanting to do for a little while here. We're going to talk about content administration, kind of content management, and the update that's just recently been released for you to more easily administer your content. We're going to start from the beginning and recap everything that already was there, but we're also going to cover the new features. So for those of you who are somewhat new to Hive, this will be a good kind of beginner admin course. And for those of you who are experienced, you'll kind of get a refresher, but then near the end of this, you'll see the new features that have been added into the Hive CMS environment for you. As always, CTC's webinars are recorded, and so this will be up on our YouTube channel shortly after the webinar itself. And also, we try to take questions live throughout the webinar. So if you do have questions while we're talking about something specific to content management, feel free to throw them in the questions window, and I'll be trying to answer them live while we go. And also, there'll be a large Q&A session near the end. Okay, so kind of quick recap. Hive is out. You're probably trying to use it, and you want to know how you can best maintain your content. And that's what we're kind of covering today. We're going to go through best practices for optimizing libraries, creating some searches, updating families as they change. That's actually the real key part there, the updating of families. And we're going to do this all live so you kind of see exactly how this can work for you. We're going to cover a few main things. The strategies for the best Hive library configuration, kind of a baseline. You may have some of your own custom ideas you want to incorporate, and that's fantastic. But we're going to talk about kind of the core best practices that you might want to expand upon. We're going to understand a bit about tag creation, how you can assign and strip assignments. So we're definitely going to cover tag creation today. We are going to take a look at how you can get library content reports and use those to update content that you already have in Hive as easily as possible. Those two things right there, those are the brand new features that weren't there before. So quick recap. What is the general best practice that Sean goes through when he starts setting up a library and that you might want to follow as well? There's originally a 5-point checklist that's now a 6-point checklist because I've added in content management here, or content updating. But the first thing is checking your CMS settings, which we're going to do first thing. We're going to do some library creation, talk about how to upload content, a little bit about group configuration. One of the steps that we're not going to go deep into today is user creation, but that's certainly one of the steps that your teams can actually get access to the CMS and leverage it. And based on your group configuration, it will allow them to properly access and interact with Hive. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the content updating. And that's kind of where I'm going to focus most of my efforts. And then we're also going to talk about tag management to a degree. So without going too much more into depth by PowerPoint, let's dig in directly inside of Revit. So I have both Revit 2018 and Revit 2021 open. It doesn't really matter which one I'm in because primarily I'm going to be working with the Hive CMS here. And this Hive CMS, this works in all versions of Revit, 2017 and beyond. One thing that you'll notice here, since we're talking about content management, is that when you're processing your content, Revit families, project files, things like that, you want to be cognizant about which design app it is you're using. Now, we're going to come back to this in a minute because we're going to take a look at how you can add content to this list. But before we do that, we're going to go through that checklist. Step one, of course, is managing your Hive CMS settings, and you do that from the Hive portal. You can get to it from the Home tab. When I'm signed in, usually I see that. Oh, sorry, I got to go to the actual Home tab. I see the management portal right here. And when I click on this, what it will effectively do is open up this Hive portal right here. And by default, it'll usually drop you here on the CMS tab as well. And that's just fine once you're signed in. The first major step that you want to go through is just validate your settings for your organization. And there's a couple that you want to really pay close attention to. The first two that I always recommend you consider is the Allow Cloud Content Caching. This allows Hive to actually cache your stuff up in the cloud. I think that's a great option because then when people are working from home in this sort of distributed work environment, It makes it real easy for them to find stuff without VPNing in. They can get access to all of your content. I also tend to prefer cloud content. This is especially important if people are working from home and if they're VPN'd in to the office to get access to other files, because if this is unchecked, when Hive finds it, even if the content is available in the cloud, when they're from home and on the VPN, it can find the content locally on your work network, and it'll try to pull it from there. And that will be slow, and it will not be, a very good experience for them. So if you prefer cloud content, even if they're in the office, this generally is equal to, if not faster than, especially for project content, accessing that stuff. So I usually recommend using these two checkboxes in collaboration with each other. Now, there are two new options that directly affect how your content is processed when it's brought into Hive. And you want to take a look at these right away before you start adding content into the list. And it's these two options down here at the bottom. There's an option to disable automatic preview generation. See, Hive CMS has a built-in function right here that talks about content processor settings. With this setting here, you can choose exactly how content appears in previews if this is unchecked. Okay? If this is checked, it skips this and it just uses the preview that exists in Windows. Whatever you see from like a Windows folder or when you're trying to do load family in Revit, that's the preview that's on the family already. Hive will use that if this box is checked. If you uncheck it, it'll actually use these settings that you can define inside of here. So you can say, hey, all of my content is supposed to look from a 3D view using realistic and fine detail level. All of my content that is wall hosted specifically, and I've added all my wall hosted stuff here, is supposed to look from a different 3D orientation, maybe face-based or ceiling-based, looks a different way. You can control all of this so your content has a consistent preview if you want. Now, I know some of you have already set your previews and you don't want Hive inflicting its own preview on your content. Great, good for you and good for your library. In that case, you'll want to make sure you check this box. But if you don't have good quality previews already, you'll probably want to uncheck this box and then take a look at those content processor settings so that all your content can have a good, consistent preview. Now, if you've already got previews in your library, maybe you've set your own previews on some things. Maybe you chose manufacturer iconography and you've put that on your previews because you can replace preview images if you want to. Maybe if you've done that, you may want Hive to not replace previews regardless. If it has a good preview in Windows, or maybe you are using this. If you wanted to just say, look, if the content already exists and I already like its preview, don't replace it, you can check this box here. Otherwise, Hive will always try to replace it and use whatever this option here is telling it to do, either using what's in Windows or using whatever Hive generates. So take a look at those two options, all four of these, before you start adding content or things you're going to want to consider, whether it cloud content caches, whether it prefers cloud content, whether you're using the Hive preview generation or not. This is setting to not. And whether or not you want to use the existing preview or replace what's up there. Okay, if you check both of these boxes, if the content already exists, Hive just won't generate a preview. It'll just use what's already there. And if you don't like the preview that's already there, well, it's going to keep it because you've told it to. So make sure you're aware of these settings. Once you update these and you hit save, then from this point forward, when Hive is working, when it's doing its processing, it will use these specific settings to make sure that it's all configured correctly. So that's step one. You always want to make sure you check this before you really get digging deep into Hive. Now, step two is to build some libraries, because you have to have a destination for this content before you can process anything. And so step two happens on the same CMS main tab. Here in the Manage Libraries drawer, we're going to go to the Libraries tab. These are your corporate libraries that you fully control. Now, there are 4 libraries that I recommend you make right away. And you might modify these a bit over time. You might decide you want more or you want fewer. That's up to you, but there's 4 that I recommend you consider right away. The first one is Revit Content for your company. In my case, I've got it called Revit Content CTC, right? So it's got my corporate initials. I know this is my corporate content. Whatever gets put into here is mine. Now, if you're a distributed company where you've got 40 different office locations or even 5 different office locations, whatever, you may want to have some siloing of this content. Maybe you've got some content per region. Maybe you've got Canadian content versus US content versus whatever. So you can do whatever you want with this, but I recommend you at least have Revit content for your company in some form. You may also want to have, in place of that, maybe corporate content for different verticals within your firm, different practice groups, like architecture versus mechanical versus electrical versus plumbing, right? Structure. You may have 5 different Revit content libraries that's specific to your company. Still call them by your company, identify that, and you can make those 5. But ideally, this kind of, I group this into one little thing, like one library, but you might decide to split that apart a little bit. The next one that I recommend is that you have Revit content for out-of-the-box stuff. Invariably, people want some of the out-of-the-box content. And if you're not touching it and it's truly just out-of-the-box, throw it in this library here. As soon as you modify that content, you make it something else, it should go into your corporate library up here. Okay, leave it in the out-of-the-box for the original, or maybe not, maybe get rid of it there and let people only find the one from your corporate. But have that be part of your organizational structure there. So your corporate and the out-of-the-box. And then the other 2 here is standards and procedures. I love distributing my standards through Hive because where they're searching for content, they can also find the standards right there. Now, if you already have a super quality way of distributing your standards, good on you. Leave it that way. That's fine. It doesn't hurt to also put it into Hive as long as you maintain it. But I do like having my standards and procedures here so people can search for the PDFs and the training documents and the whatever they need while they're working in Revit. They're not going to a separate system. That helps kind of reinforce Hive being the single source of truth for them. And then finally, I like having here templates. And I put my Revit templates, my project templates in here, starter projects or typical traditional Revit projects, however you want to do that. I like starter projects as my template base, but you can do whatever you need. But I put them into Hive as their own separate group. I don't put them in Revit content for the company. I like to make them their own simple thing. It makes it real easy to filter for them later. And then you can also feel free to throw some other things like project correspondence documents in there for templating. Maybe there's, I don't know, requests for information templates. You name it, you do what you need. All right. So making a library, super simple. You simply go up here, you click the new button, you give it a name, Revit content for my company, XYZ, whatever, and you click create. If you're going to make all 4 of them or 5 of them or however many you need in sequence, create a new and just continue on. Key points here. Remember, our first step in organization was to make sure we could upload content. You may have a pet client or a government project who demands their content not be in the cloud. I understand. You can still use Hive. Because on a specific library, if I was doing this for, I don't know, government XYZ, so-and-so, whomever, doesn't matter. I can just say this library, whatever goes in here, does not upload. And then when I create that, whatever content gets explicitly put in this library will not be cached in the cloud. Fantastic. Good to go. So that special content doesn't need to go cloud hosted if you don't want it to. That does mean, though, people will have to be on a VPN or somehow connected to your office to gain access to that content if it's not in the cloud, right? So, but yeah, it's your choice how you decide to implement this. Hive is great because you can mix and match cloud hosted and not cloud hosted. And a lot of companies really like that because it lets you do a lot with a single platform. Okay, if I create this, let's go ahead and just call this XYZ. I'm going to tell it that I do want it to upload. Click create. It makes it. I'm done. If I hit create new, it would just let me make another one. But here's my library. It's as simple as that. You just make some new libraries. You move on, right? The 4 or 5 that you need, maybe 6 or 7 you need, you're done. So, by the way, I want to take one step back because there was a question that was posed that relates to this preview generation. And I felt like I'm going to go ahead and answer this right now. There was a comment about 3D previews not being good for profiles, detail views, and for that matter, annotation symbols. And you're absolutely right. That's true. When Hive does these previews specifically, all content leverages these settings right here, whether or not you want to show dimensions and reference planes, lines, all the things, right? Nothing about 3D exists here. In the appearance settings, this is specific to model families. So not detail items, not drafting views, not annotation symbols, not profiles. This is none of this is specific to those items. It's all about this, that's everything. And then these are just the 3D families. Okay. So, all right. We finished step 1, we finished step 2, we've done the library creation, and now it is time to do step 3, which is to upload some content to those libraries. And I like doing this step next because it lets me have Revit processing while I'm doing other things. And so how do we do that? Well, when you're processing Revit content, you do need to have some version or versions of Revit open. Now, if I'm just doing Revit families, RFAs, I like to do it in just the latest version of Revit I have available, which for me is Revit 2021. And so in Hive here, I'm going to do all my processing. I'm not actually going to process anything today because we don't want to sit here and watch this parse through, but I would do all my processing in Revit 2021 if I'm doing Revit families, RFAs. If I'm doing project-hosted content, well, to do that, I have to have the project file open in the proper version of Revit because that's important. And so I would then be processing just project-hosted content like schedules and drafting views and things like that in its appropriate Revit version. But everything else, families and Word documents don't matter, but Revit 2021 is what I'm going to process in today. So it doesn't matter if I have other versions open right now. The one thing you do want to make sure you have is the proper library chosen. Now, since I just added that Revit Content XYZ library, I'm going to hit the refresh button here, and it's going to get me the latest list of all of my libraries. And so I can be like, oh yeah, this new content gets added here to my corporate library. Or since I'm going to be doing some out-of-the-box stuff, I'm going to go ahead and just do Revit Content out of the box. That's the library that I want this to go to. Generally speaking, I try to keep my content in as few libraries as possible. There are some times when I do cross-reference my content to multiple libraries, but usually my general preference is to keep it in as few as I can. You can do whatever you need, of course. At this point, I'm going to completely ignore tags. Yes, I have some. We haven't talked about making them yet. I just happen to have them from previous examples, but we're not going to assign tags right here. Generally, I want to just dump a bunch of stuff in, and I ignore tagging until a later time. So how do I dump a bunch of stuff in? Oh, well, let's call up a Windows Explorer window. This is my favorite way of dumping content in. I'm going to go browse for some stuff. I'm just going to use the out-of-the-box content since this is an out-of-the-box discussion here. We'll go ahead and use Autodesk. I'm just using this from my C drive in this case. You'd probably want this to be on a network location someplace. But we're going to go ahead and pull in some content from, let's say, Revit 2018. Doesn't matter where, because I'm going to process it in 2021. Yeah, it'll open it and it will upgrade it, but that's okay. I'm not going to sit here and babysit this content while it's opening and upgrading and doing a thing. I'm simply going to let it do what it's supposed to do and go grab lunch or something, or go to a meeting or whatever. Doesn't matter. So let's say I wanted to throw in some US Imperial content here, and I want to go grab some doors, right? There's a lot of doors here. There's some subfolders. There's type catalogs. There's things like that. I don't feel like being super picky. Oh, I have some backup files here. I should get rid of these. These I didn't want. I probably should use my tool that actually is the family cleanup tool that lets me go clean those up, but we'll ignore that for now. I don't necessarily want to have to go into every single subfolder and then drop the content across. That's tedious. So what I'm just going to do is grab the doors folder as a whole, or if I wanted to wait a few extra minutes here, or seconds rather, I'd probably just grab the US Imperial folder and drop the whole thing on there. But I'm just going to drop doors for now. And when you drop this over, it adds just the families into Hive. It's smart enough to know that you probably don't want the users searching for and finding the type catalogs. Now, Hive will reference the type catalogs. It knows about them, but it doesn't have to have them searchable to the end user. It just uses them when it scans this family, which I think is fantastic. But it's got in this list here now, if I kind of squish this down a little bit, 55 pieces of content from 2018. And it tells me the Revit version. And when I click process, it'll open them up in Revit 2021, and it'll upgrade them temporarily, scan them, and then get that data for its own purposes, and then upload the family because I'm telling it to actually upload. It does all that in one main step. I just click process and I walk away. Or, do something else. The only time, again, I have to pick a specific Revit version is if I'm doing project-hosted content, where I would add things like walls or system families, drafting views, sheets, schedules, model groups, detail groups, things like that. Then I would need to be in a specific project and have the right design app active. But generally, I'm just doing a big bulk add, click process, let it do a thing. At the end, Hive will give me a report that it did something. Okay, the next step, while that's processing, the next step that I like to do while it's sitting there thinking is I go back to the Hive portal, and it's just chugging along in the background, all good and all well. And I'm going to jump over to Users and Groups tab here. Now, you do have to have user and group access to do this step. There are different rights that exist inside of Hive, and a person could have just CMS access where they can't create new users and new groups. So an org admin would have to do this specific step, or a user and group manager have to do this specific step. But I'm going to go into groups. And in groups, I generally recommend at least 2 groups. And you may want to get more granular than that depending on how you work with your libraries. Really, I use my groups for different kinds of Hive access. You can see I've got an everyone group here. And you may guess that basically all of my corporate users of Hive get put into that everyone group. I do have a BIM managers group. All of my BIM managers get put into that group. I have project managers. I might have org admins. I might have a few others in the list. But really, everyone in BIM managers are the 2 that I recommend you start with right away. For the purpose of content management, that's the important bit. And really, making a group is very much like making a library. You just hit the little plus sign. You give it a name, some group. Group, if I could spell. Oh, good Lord, I can't spell today. Some group, for some reason, whatever gosh, still can't spell. My fingers don't want to work today. What is it they used to say? Just wash my hands and can't do a thing with them? Whatever. Anyway, so when I continue, this will give it some name. And it also asks you if you want to assign any kind of organizational roles at this point. Now, if this was a BIM manager type group, I'd probably make them a CMS admin. And maybe I would want them to be request admins, and maybe I would want them to have some user controls and things like that. You can do some of this if you want to. Anybody who gets put in this group will have those rights. This just means you don't have to assign rights at the user level, okay? You can throw them into a group and they automatically get those rights, and you can strip them from the group and they automatically get those rights stripped from them, okay? So ultimately, though, when you save this, you're just giving a group identifier is all it is, right? I've got some group here. It's made for some reason. I'm good to go, right? I'm going to use this in my next step, the same step, which kind of pairs up with my library creation. And that is, I'm going to jump back to the CMS once I've created my everyone in my BIM manager group and maybe some other groups, whatever you need. Over here on the CMS in libraries, you're going to start assigning some rights. Again, the content's processing in the background right now. You're just doing this on the side. I'm going to go here to the Revit Content XYZ. This is one of my corporate libraries. I'm going to set up the permissions for this the way that I would normally want this configured. I personally never assign users directly. It's too micromanagey to me. I always do it by groups, and then when I'm doing my user management and I put them in the right group, they just get the proper rights, just like your IT does in folder structure management and distribution and security groups, right? Same thing in Hive. So I'm going to go ahead and find my everyone group. I'm going to go ahead and find my BIM manager group, and I'm going to choose what their default role is going to be. Let's just say I'm going to make everybody starting out as a contributor here and add this to my list. I'm going to talk about roles in a minute. So I just added them real quick, and I can always change roles later. Like my BIM managers, they're probably all going to be library managers for these libraries. That means they can edit whatever content exists in this library. They can add content to the library. They can manipulate all tagging in this library. They can do all the things they're supposed to do for managing stuff that is in the Revit Content XYZ library, if I assign a manager role. Everyone else in my company, you can see I gave them the default role here of contributor. This means they can find stuff, and if I've allowed it, they can comment, they can leave me feedback, they can do a little bit of tagging as well, but they can't add and remove content from the library. They don't have that level. They're not manager level, but they can do some tagging, which is good. That lets me crowdsource my tagging. It also means, again, that they can leave me feedback, and I may not want that. So there are other libraries that I set up. I'm going to save this one and close it out. There are other libraries I set up, like my standards and procedures library right here, where in my permissions, everyone is not given contributor rights. They're given consumer. All this means is they can find it. They can find it and they can use it. They cannot leave feedback. They cannot manipulate tagging. All they can do is find it and use it. And that helps me kind of reduce the in-bickering that sometimes happens in something like a standards and procedures environment where users might, leave comments like, in my previous firm, we did things this way. Well, good for you. How about you go work for them again, right? Like, I don't want that kind of commenting here. I have the standards defined. If I really cared about people's opinions, I would bring them into a standards discussion meeting, not in Hive. The BIM managers, however, again, I've added them as a manager role because if documentation changes, I don't want to be the sole manager of this. I want my team of BIM managers to help me. So I've chosen to do BIM managers as a manager level role here, right? So you have the granularity on a library by library level to change how groups of people can interact. Ultimately, you save it when you're done, you close it, and you're off doing other things. Okay, that was step 4. So we did group management, and we then assigned those groups to the 5 or so libraries that we've made, 4 or 5 libraries we made, whatever that was. The last major step, and this would be a user admin who would do this, would be to go to users and groups and then do like creation of the actual users and assigning them to roles. And there's different, we're going to have a future webinar about how to exactly work with that, with the downloading and uploading of Excel files or tying it with Active Directory sync and things like that. That's a topic for another day. We're talking content management today, but that really is the 5th major step. And in previous presentations, that's where we stopped. But now there's a new step in the mix, and that is updating content in the future. How do we update stuff in the future, right? We've processed content, people have been using it, it's all well and good, but now all of a sudden we want to add some tagging to things. How do we administer that? We want to, people have been continually changing Revit families, but they haven't necessarily updated stuff in Hive. Maybe they were just editing families, but they didn't have rights to actually reprocess things. Well, how do I know what they've edited? I have no idea what they've edited. So let's see how we can recover from that. Like, how can I continually update stuff? Let's remove everything from this list for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Hive to export this library. This is a library by library option. You're going to run an export content process. What it's going to do is email you, whoever you're logged in as, it's going to email you a link to download all of the content, a list of all of the content and the properties of all the content that exists in the Revit Content Out of the Box library. Okay, I'm going to go check my emails real quick on a different screen. There it is. Okay, I'm going to go download that. And then where is this at here? I'm going to go to my downloads folder, downloads. There we go. Right there's my content files here, right? So I've got content files that was downloaded today. This is from my library. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn right around and I'm going to update my library based on those content files. Just open that up. And it's going to actually edit this file. It scans the file. It scans all the families. This can take a little bit of time, but what it's going to do is basically look through every single file that Hive knows about. It's going to mark in that Excel file. Let me open this guy up so you can actually see it. I'm going to make a copy of it so we're not editing the original here. But I'm going to open this guy up in Excel, and you can see that this thing has a status column right here. And it knows whether things have been updated on my drive or if there's been no change or if it can't detect for some reason. But it goes through every single file entry here for every single RFA or Revit project content that was in there. It'll let me know if things have been renamed or deleted if it can't find the original path. But it gives me this entire report. And then ultimately when it's all done, all of those things that have been marked as quote unquote updated will appear in this list over here. And it takes a little bit because it's got to scan for every single family. In my case, I've got probably, I don't know, someplace in the neighborhood of about 10,000 entries there. There's a couple of warnings and a bunch of info, and that's all good and well, and I could take a look at that. But it ultimately adds to this list all of those files, right, that have been updated for some reason. And then all I have to do, once again, in Revit 2021 here, I'm going to use the latest possible Revit version because there's probably a mix and match of different things. There's some 2018s. I saw a flicker there. There was a 2019 in the mix someplace. There might be some 2020s. I don't know. Yeah, it's mostly 2018s in this case. But regardless, I'm just going to click process and let it reprocess all that stuff if I feel that's correct. Now, there might be some of these that I want to remove that maybe I don't want to process, whatever. But this lets you have the easy ability to rip through all of your libraries, well, in this case, a library, get the report, update the content based on that report. It'll add it to the list. You click process, you let it do its thing, and then later on, you're going to do the next one. You'll do the next one. You do the next library, and so on. You just keep doing that. So, all right. That's how you basically reprocess, re-update things in Hive. It's simple. Export content report, check your email, get the list, leave it in your downloads folder. Once you've downloaded it, hit the update, grab that file, and it'll scan the entire thing and give you a list of all the things that have been updated and let you reprocess it. And you can also, if you want to, by the way, feel free to write your own Microsoft Power BI reports on that and have it give you information back. That file does tell you the last time that piece of content has been dropped. Do you have things in your library that have never been used? Let me open up the original here. If I go here to the right, far to the right, loaded at is what it's called right here. Let's expand this. Okay, loaded at. There's a lot of things here that have never been loaded. If I drop this list down, there have been things that have been loaded in 2018, 2019, 2020, but there's a lot of blanks. There's a lot of things that people have never used in the entire history of me having them put into Hive, way back as far as 2017. So if that's the case, why do I keep maintaining these things, right? Sometimes this might be a great way for you to figure out things that you just want to strip from your library. Okay? All right. Again, Microsoft Power BI can be a great way of going through this report and understanding who added, who edited, what the file sizes are, all that kind of stuff, so you can do with it whatever you need. All right. I did see, by the way, another question pop up, and this is specific to the library administration here. Libraries right here. There was a question about, can people from outside my firm be a consumer or contributor level role? And yeah, they absolutely can. In fact, if you go here to invitations, you can do external invites to people outside of your firm, and you can choose what their level is. They can even be managers in the new Hive. You could make an outside person, outside of your firm, a manager of your library. If you had a hired consultant who you wanted to help you with your content administration, you can make them that level of role. Now, this is a user by user level. You can't do groups permissions with this. They have to be a part of your company to put them into a group. But you can invite outside people to be consumers, contributors, or managers of your libraries. All right. Now let's talk about the final thing here in Hive content administration, and that is tag management. Where do these tags come into play? Because, hey, Sean, earlier you said you don't tag when you're adding content, and I don't. I really don't care to. What I do later on is I come back over here and I'll run searches for things and stuff, and I'll find, content. And maybe I want all of the single doors in here to be tagged as single doors. In fact, I think I've already done that, and I think I'm not using the tag single. I guess I just put in a search string of single, and it's probably finding that anyway. But all of this content here, if I take a look at the details, and I go look at the content properties, oh no, these aren't even tagged as single. Well, look at that. Maybe I should tag them. Well, how do I tag them? Now, you can select as many things as you want, and you can right-click, and you can manage tags if you're a manager of the library or a CMS admin or an org admin, and you can assign tags to things, and you can remove tags from things. Now, if you go to assign tags the first time and you're like, hey, I don't have any tags in my list. How do I work with a tag? Well, there's this create button right here. And ultimately what it will do is it'll bring you to the website, to the Hive portal, to the tags area, and you simply make a tag. Just like making a group and just like making a library, you just give it a name. So I'm going to call this, I think I've already got single. Do I have that one already? Let's see. There's a lot of tags I've got. Let's do 100 of these things. Single, can I spell? It's alphabetical. Sliding. I guess I don't. I have swing, but I don't have single. Maybe I want to put single as a tag. Okay, so I'm going to make a new tag called single. Where tags, new tag, single. Okay, and I'll just create that anew, and I'll also add in here, since I've got single, I'll add in double. and I'll create that. Okay, so I've just added single and double. And I'm going to jump back into the CMS over here, and I'm going to refresh my list so that double shows up and effectively single shows up. And so I'm gonna basically search for single here, add that, and these are all swing doors. So I'm going to go ahead and tag them all as swing, check that as well. And so I've got basically single and swing checked in my list. I'm going to select that, and it's going to apply those tags to all of these doors. And that'll make it so that if I wanted to filter by things that were single or swing doors, then I could simply use that in my filters portion over here in Hive to effectively be able to say, only show me things that are swing tagged, that are doors, that are, matching a search string of single, which I probably don't need anymore. I can just put an asterisk in here. And then if I do that and I let this search run, it'll find me things that match that criteria. Now, apparently my double doors here somehow are tagged as, well, they're tagged as swing, which is, I think, what I filtered by. Yeah, swing. So these are tagged as swing. I didn't also put single in there, but, it's finding the things that match my criteria. Out of the box content, everything that matches swing and is doors, right? So you can leverage those tags if you want to, be able to use this far more easily. You can build those tags up all day long if you need to. End users who are contributors, they can't author new tags. So if they're right-clicking on something and they're trying to assign a tag or even assign a library, they will not be able to get the create button. That'll be disabled for them. Only library managers and better can do that. But end users, if they were like, hey, Raleigh, I need you to make me a tag. And then that person goes and makes that tag. They could refresh right here inside of Hive and go, oh, there's the tag. And I can check the thing and associate it to my content. So it's still a pretty streamlined workflow. Similarly, by the way, you can strip tags away. If you realize like, hey, back in the day, I tagged things as Imperial. That was silly. I shouldn't have done that, because I don't need things tagged as Imperial anymore, because Imperial is actually a native inherent property on content now. So it's a redundant tag that you're manually managing that might start to filter things out if you stop using it. So, I wouldn't do Imperial or metric. I wouldn't do version-specific tagging because that's already a property of content as well. So I would get rid of those. So to strip tagging from things, you can highlight as many things as you want. You can do manage tags, remove tags to one by one remove specific things, like Imperial, right? That removes Imperial from the 14 families that I've selected. But if I really want to get rid of Imperial, what I'm probably going to do is simply go over here into my tags, and I'm going to go find Imperial right here, and probably metric as well. Let's refresh this, because I want all of my tags, all 100 of my, 62 of my tags, and we're going to go grab metric here and Imperial, and then I would just go up here to the top and just delete those, right? I'm not going to do it right now because I want to keep them for future examples, but you would delete them, and that'll strip the references from the content as well as deleting the definition of the tag in the first place, so it can no longer be used. Okay, final point that I want to make for everyone today, so you can understand even more about how you can leverage this to understand your libraries and be a better content manager. Over here on the dashboard tab, we have a CMS area where you can understand some things like how much total content do you have, user favorites, how people are searching, Revit content, specific kind of uses in your firm, how it's balanced from different versions, the tagging of content, things like that. And this is all well and good, but if you want even more power, if you want more data to work for you, go to downloads. Get the Microsoft Power BI. First of all, download Microsoft Power BI Desktop. Get the Power BI template. The first time through, get all of the data by email here for CMS, for project data. If you're not using it, that's fine. It'll just be an empty file, no big deal. Get your Hive users and groups reports out of here. And then once you get them and you hook them up to your Power BI file, you can do things like this here, where I'm in Microsoft Power BI, and I can start to understand even more about my content and have much better cross-filtering on my site that's much more responsive, because Power BI is built for this kind of stuff. And the data now exists on your hard drive, and you can work with it. You can make your own reports. You can ask your own types of questions like, hey, those search results that have 0 search results, what are they? Who searched them? What did they search? What were they doing? What Revit versions do I have at play, right? I don't know. When is Sean active in doing searches, and what kind of searches is that person running, right? You can do this stuff on the fly super quick. Tell me more about my tags. Show me all those that have never been searched. Look at this. Imperial has been used 4,300, or it's associated to 4,300 entries of content, but it's never been searched. Never once. Do I really need that tag muddying up my list if it's never been searched? I mean, at least the architecture tag has been searched 11 times, right? That's meaningful. Structural has never been searched. Healthcare has never been searched, right? But I can see this kind of stuff real quick, real fast. I can understand what's going on with my libraries here. Maybe I've got tags that are underused. CTC client CTC software or mini-training. It's only associated to one thing and no one's ever used it. Maybe I delete that tag and just don't have it if it's not really meaningful. Or maybe I teach people how to use my tags. Maybe I want them to use them more, and so I can help them understand more about how they can leverage searches. All right. Okay. I want to point something else out about this sort of content management here. I was pointing out on the portal how you can navigate through and get these different reports from the portal, which I think is great. For a quick down and dirty, quick way of getting report data, this is fantastic. But you know what? I'm not always sitting in front of my computer. Sometimes I want to do some of this administration while I'm standing behind a user at their desk. I don't want to log into the portal, but I've got my smartphone with me. And so key thing here, with Hive, you can manage your Hive portal from any web-enabled device. Doesn't matter. Hive21.ctcsoftware.com will get you, well, https://hive21ctcsoftware.com will get you access to this Hive portal from your iPhone, from your Android phone, your tablets, you name it, your Chromebook. It doesn't matter. If you've got the internet and you can surf web, you can use the Hive portal, and you can even put a shortcut to that web page directly on your desktop of that if you want to. So, yeah. Oh, by the way, we'll talk about how to obtain this. In fact, let's talk about this now. I'm going to get to the questions here in 1 second because I just saw another question pop up. How can you get your hands on Hive? Or how can you get your hands on the latest version of Hive? Well, if you already own Hive, you can go to the CMS tab into the organization settings, and you can get the latest installer right from here. This will give you the latest downloads, gives you all the MSI files that you need to install the CMS, and if you want some of the other features like the Active Directory sync, you can get that out of there. All that exists in this latest installer download. If you don't already own Hive and you want to try it out, what we're going to do is go to ctcsoftware.com here, and we're going to go to Products. We're going to go here to Hive, Getting Started with Hive. This will let you try it out. Try out Hive for 14 days, give it a shot, see if you like it, do some of this setup. If you decide that you like it and you want to buy it, well, you just buy it, you go live, and all the work you've put in just continues to go forward. So by all means, check it out. If you do already own it, well, great. You go and log into your portal and you download the latest installer and you're good to go. So I do want to thank you for the time that you've given us. We always appreciate when you show up live, throw questions our way. It makes it more fun for us. Hopefully it makes it more entertaining for you. So, thank you for that. We do look forward to seeing you in future CTC webinars.